This is Cultivating Success with Dr. Allison Bremner. I have a really amazing guest today. Well, actually, I'm a guest in his studio, Jack Jostes. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I think that the most important thing you can do when you're first graduating is get a website and get your SEO on point. So I got the man who's written the book that I always recommend, Get Found Online. Jack, thanks for having me here.
Dr. Allison, thanks for having me on your show. Yeah, so we are in my studio right now, but we're doing your podcast, and it's a pleasure. For people listening who aren't aware, we're in Lyons, Colorado right now, and I've been a patient of yours, and I've gotten to work with you on your marketing, so it's pretty cool to now be on your show.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, and we had talked about, I came down to Lyons, which is awesome because every time I pass through Lyons, I'm like, I'm going to stop. So it gave me the opportunity to do that. And man, you guys, we've been trying to do this podcast for the past 2 hours, but we've just been chatting because Jack's been a friend of mine for a while, and we've been talking about marketing, and he deals with people all the time that are in service-based industries, and they don't understand necessarily why SEO is so important. So hopefully we'll talk about that today.
Yeah, definitely. It is important. And I'm also a big believer in chiropractic. We just had coffee, and I was saying, unfortunately, I've worked with chiropractors since I was about 12, and fortunately they exist because I've had a lot of injuries, and you've helped me with them, and other chiropractors have helped me at different stages of my life. So I'm a big believer in the power of chiropractic, and also a big believer in the power of marketing to help people discover chiropractic, which is really why we're here.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of the same. People don't know they can get help with chiropractic, and I think people don't know they can get help with getting their online marketing going. Do you want to talk about the story about how you came in? Let me talk about why I hired you.
Yes.
So Jack used to work in the office across from my office, and we, would talk about different things in marketing, and I was like, man, this guy is awesome. And so one day I was like, I have to get a website going because I had left my franchise, and so they had websites developed, honestly not great, but it was free, so I did that. And as soon as I left that franchise, I was like, I'm going to go to Jack, I'm going to talk to him. And I had talked to many website people, and I was like, eh. And when I sat down with Jack, I was like, oh, this guy is smarter than I am, a lot smarter than I am. And so the first thing we talked about, right, was ideal client. Like who we're trying to get into the office, and what does that look like as far as the pictures you want to use, the colors of the website, like funneling them into your office and making sure that your leads are people you actually want to see. So you remember that conversation we had?
I do, yeah. I remember, I'm envisioning it right now. We had this giant wood table.
Yes, that was huge.
At that time. And it was partly just because there was this big conference room. But yeah, in my new book, The Tree of Good Fortune, which is more of a book for landscapers, my first book, Get Found Online, is for local business owners. But the ideal customer, or what I call your hell yes customer, is so important in business because we need to focus on attracting and serving people who need what we do, are willing to pay for it, and there's enough demand. There's enough of these people to create a thriving business. And in my own business, in my own experience of starting out, I focused on everyone and everything, and I realized that wasn't really a very good way to grow a business. And I believe it applies to growing chiropractic office as well, especially in a town like Boulder where are there 200 chiropractors or like?
The number is unknown. I've tried to research
I mean,
it.
I remember looking online, but it was legitimately well over 50 offices.
Definitely over 100.
Yeah, definitely over 100 offices in a population that's 150,000 people?
Yeah.
Right? So in a market like that, who is going to hire you, and why would they hire you instead of the other 99 chiropractors?
Yeah, definitely. And so if you don't know, my target market is going to be women. So I see women with neurological conditions, vertigo, headaches, migraines, things like that. And typically, kind of upper middle class has enough money to spend on care. Our care is a little more expensive. And that really want care that's not just like kind of one and done, that really want a care plan catered to them. Our office has a nap room, which, you love to sit in the nap room. So it's almost like a spa experience. So those are the type of women that we want to get into the office. And I mean, when did we actually launch that website? 5 years ago? My original website.
I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, it's so easy to just like check my email and see a patient request instead of going out there running around with the spine, chasing people down, trying to get them in the office.
Right. Well, and it was well built. I mean, I helped build it, right? My team built it, but we built it in a way that you'll get many years out of that, and it actually continues to increase in its value from an SEO standpoint.
Yeah.
So the website in my book, I have the foundation of digital marketing. And what I found is many businesses go in the wrong order of their marketing, meaning a lot of them are paying for online ads or social media, or they're paying for these bright and shiny marketing objects. But if you don't have some of the basics, like a quality logo or quality photos of you in your office and a website where people can read about you, or online reviews to know that you're not some quack who's going to break their neck or something, right? Without those things, it's going to be very hard to grow your business.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to grow, and to your point, like hard to charge what you're worth, right? Because if you don't have online reviews, or even worse, bad online reviews, they're going to have an experience, or think they're going to have an experience. Like, why am I going to pay $3,000 for care if, I'm not seeing other people rave about your business?
Right. And for people who haven't worked with a chiropractor, there's a lot of fear.
Yes.
Well, how does this work? They're going to crack my neck? Is that a good idea? Should I really let somebody do that? So there's a lot of fear and uncertainty from an emotional standpoint, and things like a website and reviews give them a feeling of security. And the reviews in particular is something that you've really excelled at. When there are dozens, or at this point for you, hundreds of other people who have verified online that this works and I felt good and I feel better, they're going to feel safe about contacting you for something with their health.
Yeah, and I do talk about this with chiropractors all the time, is I'm like, man, you need to start pumping your online reviews. And then their pushback to me typically is they're scared. They're like, well, if I get on these like online sites, then someone could write a bad review. And I'm like, no, it protects you. Right now we have, I think, 317 5-star reviews. Someone writes a 1-star review. We do have 2 1-star reviews. They're both my past associates, and they're both about billing. It's not to do with care. It's that they weren't clear with the patient. Hey, it's going to be this amount of money. They came in thinking it was going to be $20, right? So that was a 1-star review. But those people look crazy. There's 300 people being like, this changed my life. And there's 2 people that are like, I didn't want to pay, $285 for an exam. Those people sound crazy. So it actually protects you, because
it does,
at this point, a 1-star review only helps us.
It actually does. So I recommend to people who are listening, who are just starting out, is getting to 10. 10 reviews should be your goal. Like, you should really stop this podcast and go get 10 reviews by personally emailing people, maybe even calling them, asking them in person, hey, Carl, we really appreciate you as a patient, and could you help me with something? I'm really working to get to 10 Google reviews, and it would mean so much if you wrote one for me.
Yeah.
Just a personal request like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And the reason I say 10 is because you're probably going to get at least 1 negative review at some point. And if you have 0 reviews, or if you have 2 reviews, or even 3 reviews, and now you have 1 negative review, your review average can go into the 3s or worse, right? Yeah. And I don't know about you, but when I go on Amazon, I'm like, you know what, Amazon, I'm only worthy of 3-star and below products. Show me 3 stars and below, right? Of course not. I'm looking for 4 and above. I'm reading negative reviews. And if you have, like you said, a handful of negative reviews, but a bunch of positive ones, you're set.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, chiropractors also, I think they struggle with asking in general for things. The language I use is this, and I have this for my associates. Sarah comes in, she had her appointment, she says something like, I'm feeling great. Sarah, I'm so glad that you're feeling great. Hey, could you do me a really big favor? And I pause. The longer the pause, they think the bigger the favor. And then when the favor is just, would you write an online review? They go, oh, of course I will write an online review for you. And it's easy peasy. And I say, Sarah, to make it as easy on you as possible, I'm going to send you the link to our review, and just tell, whatever you came in with, whatever your experience is, just write that. And I found that is a high rate of people actually doing it. If you just ask them, a lot of times, life is busy, they mean to do it, they can't find it, they don't know where it is. So make it as easy on them as possible, and make it sound like they want to do a favor for you because you've helped them. Yeah. So they want to do something to help you.
I love that. It's right out of Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That's the game. Make people like you.
Well, Well, and asking, make
Yeah.
them feel like they're helping you, and they
Yeah.
are. And for people listening who have other associates or other people in their office who are doing that, getting them to ask people personally, hey, could you help me
Yeah.
with this?
And it makes people feel good
It
when
does.
they do help you.
Most people want to help people.
Yeah, definitely.
At least the good patients that you do.
Yeah. There's some patients where you're like, you know what, you're coming in and paying me. That's as good as it's gonna get, and that's okay.
Or they might not have a Google account. They might not
That's
have.
true. Sometimes they don't have.
They might not have a Gmail or something like that.
That's very true. Let's talk about when you first came in the office. I think this is a funny little story because we had just built the site. We had really worked on ideal client, and I had told you exactly who I wanted to see. And one day you walked into my office.
Yeah, so I had a couple spine injuries. One was on a trampoline when I was like 12. Another one was in my cervical spine when I was like 15 or 16. I actually lost my hearing, and I went to a chiropractor who adjusted me and helped me regain my hearing. And I know that's also how chiropractic started.
Yes.
And I love that story. I think, wasn't the patient like a custodian or something?
Yep. You know more about chiropractic than a lot of chiropractors.
So part of it, and this is, I think, interesting for the people listening, was because I was in the Boy Scouts and the troop leader was a chiropractic patient, and they brought us to the chiropractic office just to learn about, hey, here's a person in business, here's what chiropractic is, and he held out the spine, and I was just interested in it as a kid. Not enough to like pursue it as a career. But then, I guess it was like 5 years ago, I was having terrible headaches, vision problems. There were times where I couldn't even get up. Like I literally, I remember I was in a trip at a cabin with like my wife and kids and a bunch of other families, and I couldn't help pack up. I couldn't help do basic stuff like put a duffel bag in the car. I was in so much pain that I couldn't see. And so I had worked with you on your website, and it's helps people with, headaches. And I was like, well, I have all of these problems, but I'm not an affluent female.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you help me? Do you want to work with me? And we talked about it, and it was more, I think, that you found that in general, women were willing to invest in the complete package of care. And you were upfront with me, even though I had worked with you on your sales and marketing, hey, Jack, this is going to cost.
Yeah.
I think it was around $2,000. It's going to take months.
Yeah.
You're going to need to come in more than you want.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to do that, you probably shouldn't work with me.
Exactly. And you were like, well, one, it was easy on you as possible to make your appointments because you just had to walk across the hall. So
that
there was
convenience
that
factor
barrier.
was a huge plus.
And part of at that point, I think you were kind of stressed in your job at that point.
Oh yeah.
And so part of it was just getting you in the nap room after an adjustment to force you to not be on your phone, not have to deal with employees or computer. And I think that was beneficial to take a time out during your day.
It was. Yeah, it was great to come and rest after the adjustment.
Yeah. Well, and I think that shows right there. And we had talked about this earlier at breakfast, is that people get scared about niching down their market because they're like, well, what if then a guy comes and talks to me? And it's like, well, I'm not saying I don't see male patients. That's ludicrous. What I'm saying is I'm trying to find as many patients as possible that are as easy for me, my personality. You have to figure out your own personality. For me, women are easier to work with, I have found, because they're more compliant. That's all it is. But it doesn't mean that we don't help male patients. I think that I'm a little more clear with male patients, saying, I know that you probably don't want to come in this much, but you have to get better. And they either say yes or no. And that's the thing. And so if you don't niche down and you want to help everyone, that's a very confusing message.
It is, yeah. And I think there's a lot of fear around niching down, like you said. And I had that fear myself.
Yeah.
And I've taken my own business in the direction of the lawn and landscape industry. I work with snow contractors and landscape companies, and I still have many clients, and including new clients who are chiropractors or dentists or remodeling companies or things that are outside of it. I just get way more of the landscapers now, right?
Exactly.
So it just increases the chance of you getting what I call your hell yes customer.
Yeah.
And you can still take on referrals, or people are gonna not read your website and call the office,
Yeah.
and then you can have the conversation with them.
Yeah, I mean, so now now you basically go to landscaping conferences. This is another thing we talk about is where does your ideal client hang out? And that's where you do all of your efforts when you go and speak are at these landscaping conferences, because you know that they're all going to be people that are in your ideal client target market. And I see a lot of chiropractors are like, oh, I want this affluent, basically what we just talked about is my ideal client. And then they go do a screening at Walmart. And it's like, what are you doing? There's like a disconnect between that. And you should be spending most of your marketing dollars in that target market of where they hang out. So figuring out like, where do they shop? Where would they go? Where's a conference? Where could I speak where these people are? And I find that, I kind of pick on chiropractors, but really it's service-based industry as a whole.
Definitely.
And so like tell people like, what do you do now when you want to go and get new clients? Where are the places that you go?
For my own business?
For your own business, yeah.
Well, one, I have a podcast.
Yeah.
The Landscaper, and it's not everybody's podcast. It's called The Landscaper's Guide. The full name is The Landscaper's Guide to Modern Sales and Marketing. So I have a podcast, and it's a video podcast, and that's a big piece of it. And then I do a lot of public speaking. My goal is to do at least one a month. And so that might mean I'm either hosting a webinar or I'm going and speaking at a conference. And when I go and speak at conferences, they're landscape conferences, and I'm talking to their association and their education coordinator. And that way they've done 80% of the work for me of getting an audience of my ideal customer. They need somebody to deliver a valuable presentation. I come in, everybody wins.
Perfect.
Whereas prior to that, I used to, and I'm grateful for this experience. And I think part of getting to having an ideal customer is experimenting and having a lot of different customers.
You're never going to get it right on the first time.
No way. You have to sell. You have to sell and serve clients, but you need to take a look back. Maybe it's at the end of the year and you look through your QuickBooks or whatever software you're using for your chiropractic office of, well, who are the people that spent the most with me? Who are the people I would make a spreadsheet and grade them A, B, and C? Who did I actually like working with? And it's kind of that sweet spot of who did I like working with that spent a lot of money with me.
Yeah.
So I do that. And then I do a lot of social media content, repurposing my podcast. So I'm a guest on your show, but I'm like, hey, why don't I record this as a video?
Yeah.
Because I might say something that maybe there's 1 minute from this conversation that I put on my Instagram. Yeah. So I'm always thinking of how can I repurpose what I'm already doing into content? And there are people who help me do that. I have a marketing assistant who is excellent at taking the 30-minute conversation and pulling out 1 minute.
Yeah, same. And I have someone, I kind of mentioned her name, Kaylee, comes and edits my stuff because I don't know how to do any of that, and it's having someone with a different eye, especially, and another reason why I hired you is that you're not a chiropractor and you don't cater towards chiropractors. So you have another viewpoint of it. And I find that Kaylee, when she finds things that are interesting that I say, I would have never thought they were interesting. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that might be interesting to like the general public or who you think would be my audience. So, I highly recommend, chiropractors tend to not have other friends besides other chiropractors especially in school, and I recommend getting someone else's viewpoint on what you're saying.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and one of the things that we talked about was kind of dumbing it down into the words that your customers would use. Yeah. And thank you for letting us do this on your website, right? Because sometimes you read chiropractic websites and it's like, oh my God, is this like a medical, like what is this? This is all medical jargon. Yeah. And we talked about the spine, like people don't like bones. Chiropractors like bones, and you put like that to the general public, that's scary, or like lightning bolt to the back, or this really wackadoodle things that chiropractors do that they think is cool, the general public thinks is weird. And they also don't know that that's causing the problem that they're looking to solve, which are things like headaches or back pain. Pain. I almost never hire anyone that claims to cater towards chiropractors. And the reason I don't like to do that is because I feel like they pander to chiropractors, meaning that a chiropractor would be like, I want this on my website. And they're just like, okay. If I were to say something crazy to you, you'd be like, that's not a good idea. Well, I think, you've got to have that healthy balance with whoever you're working with in your marketing of like critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference between working with a marketing agency versus a website builder. Yeah. A website builder might say, hey, where do you want me to put this photo? A marketing company might say, is this the right photo? Does this photo resonate with your ideal customer? Yeah. With landscaping, this seems obvious, but I have a lot of clients who have terrible photos on their website of projects they did 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they say, oh, Jack, I get all these leads for these small projects. And it's like, well, you have photos of projects from 15 years ago when you were doing small projects. And they're like, oh, let's remove those. Whereas their current web people are like, where do you want the photo? And that doesn't mean that we don't take requests from our clients. If somebody asks us to help them do something, we're going to do it. And we're going to help think through of like, does this make sense?
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, the point of a website is to bring more clients.
It
so
is.
like, I'm very open to doing whatever the marketer says because I don't get stuck on certain things. Chiropractors will get really stuck on, oh, I'm not going to say the word treatment because that means I'm treating and we don't treat anything. And I'm like, bro, you got to let that go. Like, use the language that's going to bring them in, but it doesn't dictate your care. You still do exactly the same thing. So our office, we do strict upper cervical chiropractic. I know that probably means nothing to you, but what that means is very straight chiropractic. We're all about principle chiropractic, but my languaging to get patients in almost sounds very pseudo-medical. Like, oh, I come in for treatment. We talk about pain. We talk about symptoms because that's what people understand. But when they come into the office, my care is exactly like I would do, regardless of the language that I'm using. But I'm okay holding these ideas that would be in opposing views of each other because the important thing is that people are coming in for care. That's all I care about. So if we have to use different language or we use different pictures or whatever, I just don't understand why chiropractors get so hung up on that. Sometimes you have to just listen to someone that's going to be your translator to the general public.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of times education in general doesn't teach about business and marketing and sales. Like I was a theater major and I remember there was one day.
I can't believe you had one day in theater.
There was one day about like how to grow your career and it was like not very helpful. At all. So I think a lot of education is focused on like the technical side of what you're doing. And you have to be excellent at what you're doing when you're a chiropractor. I'm not undervaluing that, but I think in order to serve people, in order to grow your business, you have to be effective at sales, marketing, management, getting clients, billing.
Yeah, there's
like
a lot of stuff.
It really pisses people off when you're clunky at billing them.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to do that. And I think that may be the reason why so many chiropractors resist it is they just maybe haven't been exposed to it. And I think listening to podcasts and seeing speakers and reading books is one of the ways to do it.
I think you're right. And we talked about this earlier too, is that chiropractors want to open their own office right out of school. And while I'm not saying you can't do that, there is so much more involved in that than just, hey, I've opened an office. And this is something I definitely want to talk to you about, is that chiropractors seem to have it backwards, which is first I open my own office, I dump all my money into what it looks like, make it really nice, get everything set up, and then eventually I will set up a website, which is crazy because to pay for all that stuff, you need clients. So I always recommend people, the first thing you do is dump all your money into whatever you think is going to bring you the most clients in. And you can always upgrade your office. Like start very small, on a very small budget, all of the marketing and things that you want to go into building that, because that's going to generate income. Do you find that with other businesses that they kind of do the website last and that should actually be one of the first things that they're doing?
Yes, I do. And I see it I work with a lot of contractors and tradespeople. And then I also work with dentists and chiropractors and medical professionals. And I've worked with restaurants and I see it with all of them. And there's this certain attitude or belief system that if I'm really good at what I do, I'll get referrals.
Yes.
And that is somehow being really good at what I do and getting referrals my point is it is not mutually exclusive with being effective at marketing, right? So for some people often have this idea that marketing is dirty and icky, and if I'm not getting all of my business from referrals, then I must not be very good.
Yeah.
And I think people often boast, well, 90% of my business comes from referral.
Good luck selling that.
Well, yeah. So you cracked open my book and I asked the question, which business, or in this case, which chiropractic practice would you rather purchase? One that is 90% referrals to the old owner who's not going to be there anymore, or one that has a marketing and sales system that doesn't even require the owner, right?
Yeah.
Well, obviously the second one, that's a marketing driven business that has systems and all of it funnels into setting up somebody who is not the owner to do the work. That's an actual business, and that's also a more enjoyable business to operate.
Totally. I mean, this is a great point, and I talk about this with associates, hiring associates. Is the doc is busy, They want to hire an associate, but the doc gets the patients by referrals. An associate coming into that practice is going to struggle, and here's why. Because the patients don't want to see that new doc. They think, oh, I'm saying the like brand new doc out of school. Like, no, I'm here to see you. And then either two things happen. The clinic doctor either doesn't give them patients and is like, you go get your own patients. These are my patients, which is a disaster. Or two, they're trying to push their patients onto that new associate. And guess who has to take the brunt of that? The associate. They're coming in, they're getting beat up by the patients because they're like, oh, you're blah, blah, blah. And they start to treat them like less than the clinic owner. Whereas flip side, so my office, I just hired a new associate. He had 4 new patients in his first 2 days. Where'd they come from? Online. Because they have no loyalty to me or to anyone else in the office. They're like, I have this problem. Your office comes up with phenomenal reviews, comes up for my search terms. I just want to get better. So they didn't know that was his first day in the office. They're thinking this guy's been here, years. They have no association. What happened? They all loved him. They all did follow-up care because that's the system that we have going in.
I love hearing that.
Yeah, well,
that's awesome.
And we just built 5 new pages with you. So
yeah,
that's been super helpful. So thank you.
Well, cool. Yeah. And they're specific for specific things, right?
Exactly.
So like vertigo, if somebody has vertigo,
yep.
Do you think they're not going to Google about it?
Right.
Like they're gonna Google and click on every link everywhere that they possibly can. And if you have a whole page about it, like not just a little bullet point somewhere, like you're like, here's what vertigo is. Here's how. Did you know that the cervical spine can like now maybe I'm interested in the technical part of it.
Sure.
But if you address the problem that I am having first, or migraines, or these different things, and then on that page, right, there are photos of women, and there are testimonials from women who talked about their experience. It's like, oh, okay, I'm a affluent woman with vertigo in the Boulder area. I'm on this page. Yeah. There's 300 reviews. Like, look, what else would they do but contact you? Like, exactly. Are they really going to find something? Like, what else are they going to do? Yeah. They're going to contact you. Yeah. And can they get a referral from a friend to somebody who specializes in vertigo? Probably not. Unless perhaps they have a friend or they somehow meet somebody who has the specific pain and problem and they're already a patient, right? And you're going to do that. And also, referrals are great. I love referrals. Yes. Referrals are wonderful. I love them. I cherish them, but I'm never going to depend on them. I'm never going to rely on them or wait for them or like anything.
I used to say, this was like 3 or 4 years ago, I said, something's going to happen. And these chiropractors get on stage that go, I don't do any online marketing. I get all my referrals and blah, blah, blah. I was like, something's going to happen and they're going to get crushed. What happened? COVID. So then what happened? No one talked to anybody and everyone was online. Our office exponentially grew during COVID because we were online. And that was the name of the game. If you weren't online, sorry about it. Unless you just kind of tightened your belt and kind of wrote it out.
Right. So COVID, I think, accelerated a lot of internet use for small business. Like, can you imagine a restaurant now that doesn't have delivery or takeouts? Right. Like, just like a click of a button, like I'm looking to complete this transaction in like 90 seconds. Yep. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have expected that. I would have expected that from bigger businesses, franchises that have that. But now it's just like that has all changed. So I think we learned a lot during COVID. Mm-hmm. One of which is a lot of work can be done remotely.
Well, you don't even have an office anymore.
My company
I don't see you anymore.
And super grateful that it was 6 months prior to COVID. It must have been so stressful for you to.
That's a different podcast.
It is a whole other we should go on a therapy podcast for that. I couldn't imagine having to comply with all of the state and local, federal, like it's like funny to laugh a little bit, but like holy cow, that must have just been absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it was. But like I said, it actually worked in our favor in the end. I want to do a podcast that's called You Should Get Punched in the Face. Most people have never been punched in the face before. I used to box. I used to help train female fighters that were like training for Golden Gloves. I've done jiu-jitsu. I've been punched in the face a lot. And when you get punched in the face, you get immediate feedback of like dealing with it. And sometimes what happens with people that are in business is they've never had to like grit through anything. And so what COVID was is you just kind of got kicked in the teeth for a while because it made you kind of hold on. Now it's just like, this is like easy peasy. And we grew because we just stuck it out. And I wasn't going to let it mess me up. I think I put a lot of effort into it. I started making a ton of videos and making sure we got a ton of reviews. And so when we were able to like kind of get out of that, we still today are benefiting from all that online stuff that I really dove into during that time. That's what I had to do. So not sure if you've ever been punched in the face, but I think it's good learning for you.
I have.
Yeah?
And luckily it's been a while, but it hurts. And yeah, you have to recover or get beat up.
Yeah. And I think that like we talked about this a little bit about like the mindset of someone who is self-employed or an entrepreneur. It's not for everyone. And on this podcast, I talk a lot about being an associate is not less than. It's just maybe that's your personality. And I think there should be great opportunities for chiropractors to work in offices where they're supported. And they're still going to have to grind, but it's not going to be this desperate. Like what happens is I think that chiropractors do all this crazy, shiny marketing stuff. Like you're talking about the Facebook and the TikTok ads. And I'm not saying those are bad, but it's like if you're trying to lose weight, that's like a fad diet. That can make you lose weight, maybe 10 pounds quickly, but you can't do that the whole time, right? And I think chiropractors get so desperate, or service-based industries get so desperate that they're always doing these things that aren't necessarily a stable business model. But that's because they're not necessarily ready for that. And I think that you can find an office where you can be an associate, you're supported, and you're learning. My new associate, he was working at, I won't say the name of the place, but it's a franchise that sees a really high turnover of doctors and they see 50 people a day. And he was hating life because he's beat up. And he wasn't learning anything about like if he does want to own his own practice at one point, he's not learning how to do that. And so he's so excited. So like, he's like, man, the stuff that we're working on, I actually will have that knowledge forever. And that's what you should get in an office where you're working with an associate.
Well, and I think the idea of being an associate versus being the owner of the practice, there's probably a lot of benefits to not owning a practice and not owning a business. Like, I mean, like so much of business is just brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Even when it's good. I like it though.
I
in
love
some
it.
ways, like there's a certain level of like chaos.
You got to be a weirdo though. Something's got to be a little off with you.
You have to be a little off. And what I found in growing my own business is people who have run their own digital agency that don't enjoy the chaos or the growth or the stress end up becoming great employees because many of them have tried it and they're like, wow, I appreciate that you have these benefits or that I don't need to do sales and marketing or billing. Those are things that a lot of people hate doing. So I think that that's something that I've realized. And then we end up really enjoying working together. So people listening, or I don't think it's necessarily bad to realize that you don't want to do business and have your own business. Like, cool.
I want to see a movement in chiropractic to that being okay, and it's not to say that you can't. Like, I feel like I say that and you're like, you're discouraging people from opening their own practice. And I'm like, no, I'm just having them understand their own personality and just being honest with yourself. At the end of the day, everything that you do, you should just be honest and be true to who you are. And there's whatever you decide that is best for you, then there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, one important thing that somebody said to me in my second year of business that was in some ways discouraging, but it was true.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I heard it. He's like, well, Jack, it takes 10 years to build a business. Because I was like coming to this business coach in my second year with all this chaos. I hadn't figured out marketing, like actually, like I was a technician. I could do the technical part, but I didn't actually know all the sales and marketing for how to sell my own services, but to help people with it. And that gave me some perspective. I'm curious, how long have you been in business and how long does it take to build a chiropractic business where you're like working a reasonable amount and you're happy with your income?
Well, I cheated. So I would say that first of all, it probably takes 5 years to make money normally. I bought a practice. So I catapulted that and I drastically reduced my amount of time as it took to actually be successful. I was a very lucky situation where someone was burnt out. They couldn't really sell it to very many people because it was an upper cervical office. There's very few people who do upper cervical. And then within upper cervical, I do knee chest, which is even smaller. So she didn't really have anyone to sell the office to. And she didn't want to wait around because she was, I remember distinctly being like, I never want to be what she is right now. And it's interesting is I'm the age right now is where she was when she sold the office. And she wanted to get out so badly, so quickly that I was able to get the office for like way more than she was offering it. She was already offering the office pretty low. And then even further, as I was able to get it because she had no one to sell it to. She didn't have any it was all referral based. There wasn't a system that were coming in. And she wanted to do an overlap of 1 week. And this is an office she had for 15 years. And she didn't tell her patients that she was leaving. And so it's crazy.
Wow.
And so I was like, we should have a month crossover where she's there and she's introducing me. I mean, that's how you properly sell an office, is that you want the patients not only
you introduce them and
I mean, it's not only just like you're helping them be able to like keep on to these clients, but it's also because you want the patients to not feel abandoned. So we settled on 3 weeks. The last day, she just didn't show up. And patients had come in that didn't know she was selling. I had to be like, hi, I'm Dr. Allison. The other doctor is gone. And luckily, that lady, still a patient to this day. Sweetest lady ever. And she's referred a lot of patients in. So luckily it was her. And she was like, oh, okay. And me, I'm like, I just turned 30, and I was pretty baby-faced. So, and she was like, had sold herself as like this expert, which she was definitely like expert in her field, published, 11 peer-reviewed articles on case studies. So she was that kind of mindset. But I'm not that mindset. And luckily it was it was like, chasing cats, herding cats a little bit in the beginning. But anyways, so to answer that, I would say it's usually 5 years before you're even going to make money.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's a good thing. I think in podcasts, sometimes we're listening to people and like trying to benchmark ourselves. And like for me, like hearing 10 years, I was like, well, I either need to like really invest in coaching and reading books and like really going for this, or I should get out. And it got better every year. And then like around year 8, I actually started making money, and I'm in year 13 now. But yeah, it took like 10 years for me. So I don't know. I think it's important to...
It is, and it can it can take time, and there's different ways to go about it. But yeah, it's not in your head. It's not going to be as quick as that. Or even when you do get success, it's not maintained success. You can have some monster. I'm sure you've had this, some monster months where you're like, oh man, I'm crushing it, and then your brain starts to go, oh, it's only a matter of time until I'm bringing in $1 million a month. Like, is it
totally?
What happens is the managing that crash is that it does happen. Where you make these monster months, the next month for whatever reason, it's nothing, and then that's the panic.
Totally, yeah. And I've made the mistake of like taking the money out of the business as a distribution. Like, oh, I made all this money, and then like 3 months later, it's like, oh, I wish I had that money in the business. So I now definitely celebrate wins and acknowledge good quarters. But I tend to conserve money more.
Sure. Definitely.
Having gone through those experiences, and I don't even think of it as my money.
Yeah.
It's the business's money, and then like, okay, some of this becomes my money.
Yes, you have to separate that.
So I think that's stuff you just have to experience.
Yeah, it is like getting punched in the face.
Like getting punched in the face.
It is. Couple questions before we take off. If someone listening right now, if they could do one thing to help their online, what would you say is the one thing they could do?
Start asking every single customer for a review. That would be the one thing. It's free.
Yep.
Yeah, it takes time to do it, but I mean, could you imagine being like Dr. Allison here with like north of 300 reviews? That would be the number one thing, is to start getting reviews. And you could even get a review from somebody you went to chiropractic school with. And as long as they're transparent in their review, like I went to, chiropractic college with so-and-so, and they were a good ethical person.
Yeah.
Great. Cool.
Exactly.
Then you start working on getting the customer reviews over and over and over.
Yeah. And you're in student clinic. So like I think that like a lot of times new chiropractors think it has to be clients that they're seeing, and it doesn't. You were a doctor seeing people in clinic. It's okay for them. And again, transparency, like I saw this person in student clinic and they helped me so much with, whatever the thing is. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be in the current clinic you're in. So love that. All right. The 2 last questions. What is the best business decision you've ever made? And what is the absolute worst one?
The best business decision I ever made was to niche down in the landscape industry. I started out that was 8 years in that I got to that point, working with everyone from chiropractors to restaurants to lawyers to Pilates studios to whatever. And I learned about niching down, and I knew that I needed to do it. And I did fail at this. I actually niched down in the Pilates industry and learned that those businesses don't really make a lot of money, and they don't spend much money on marketing. So it wasn't what I thought it would be, but I needed to fail at that in order to figure out the landscape focus. And what was the second question?
What's the worst?
Well, the worst decision really, I think, was waiting 5 years to do that. So I knew in my heart, part of it was a feeling in my heart. It was also an intellectual. I could look at the numbers and verify that this was a good decision from the business I had already done. But I was afraid to do it, and I kind of tiptoed around it for 5 years before fully going all in. And it was delaying that decision for 5 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, like, it's fair. It's just you're scared to do it.
Yeah, totally. And I like that we're ending here, because when you're picking your hell yes customer, your ideal customer, it doesn't mean that you will not be able to work with others. It just means that you get your marketing focused on a specific person solving a specific set of problems, and they will find you, and you'll get more referrals to that, and you'll still get people who are like, hey, I'm a chiropractor. I'm working with somebody you referred to me.
Yeah.
Yes, I can help you.
Yeah.
I can totally help you.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to focus all of my marketing on it.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, guys. And Jack wants us to do a little offer. If you guys are interested in learning more about your online and how the heck to do any of it, where to get started.
Yeah, so getting started is overwhelming. There's so many options. There's Facebook and now TikTok and all these, you're like, what's next, right? So there's all these different things. It can be very overwhelming. I've created a system in my book, Get Found Online, that helps business owners understand, how does it all work? What is SEO? What can I do myself? What should I focus on first to get the best results? And I'd love to send you all a free print copy of Get Found Online in the mail. All I ask is that you pay for the shipping. So if you go to ramblinjackson.com/Allison, and that's Allison with one L, ramblinjackson.com/Allison, you can order the book, and I'll also send you some other podcasts and things that are helpful. All you have to do is pay for the shipping.
Yeah, and I've already recommended this book for you guys listening, so if you're gonna get it anyways, might as well get it for free.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show, Allison.
You're welcome, Jack. Thanks for coming on. Thanks, guys. We do this podcast the first and third Monday, and we just want to help you guys be successful and not make all the mistakes that I see young chiropractors make all the time. And it is possible. You just gotta learn a little about business. All right, see you guys.